The Hollow Warden. Chapter 1, The Invitation. The rain was a relentless siege against Dr. Mara Vexley's office window, each drop a hammer on her fraying nerves. Her desk, a battlefield of manuscripts, coffee stains, and half-read journals, held a single anomaly, a letter, its parchment yellowed as if exhumed from a grave, sealed with cracked wax bearing a serpent devouring its tail. The crest was alien, tied to no academic society or historical foundation Mara recognized. The words, penned in ink that shimmered like oil under her lamplight, offered exclusive access to Brackenridge Keep for a documentary on its untold history. Perched on a cliff in a fog-choked European valley, the prison was a myth, a blackened fortress abandoned for over a century, its iron gates unopened since the last inmate's scream dissolved into the mist. Mara, a historian and documentary producer, had built her career dismantling legends, but this invitation felt like a challenge, a gauntlet thrown at her skepticism. She turned the letter over, her fingers tracing the seal's jagged edges. No return address, no signature, just a promise of answers to questions no one dared ask. Brackenridge was a void in historical records, its existence whispered in folklore as the House of Hollow Voices. No photographs, no blueprints, only tales of vanishings, explorers, thrill seekers, even clergy who ventured too close and were never seen again. Her mind wrestled with curiosity and unease, the letters weighed more than paper and wax. She dialed her team, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. They gathered in her cluttered London office, its shelves sagging under tomes of forgotten lore. Gregor Halbrecht, her childhood friend and cameraman, slouched in a chair, his lanky frame dwarfing the furniture. His dark hair fell over eyes that held a perpetual smirk, but today they were wary. "Why us?" he asked, chewing a pencil. "Some rich nut wants to fund a ghost hunt." "Smells like a scam, Mara." Mara adjusted her glasses, her skepticism a shield. "It's not a ghost hunt. It's a chance to uncover a lost piece of history. Brackenridge has no records, no inmates, no staff, nothing. This could redefine penal systems in the region." Jonas Mercer, a paranormal investigator with wild hair and a feverish gleam in his eyes, leaned against a bookshelf, his leather jacket creaking. His fingers twitched, itching for his equipment. "You're missing the point, Mara. Brackenridge isn't just a prison. It's a beacon. Locals call it the House of Hollow Voices for a reason. People vanish there. You don't choose Brackenridge, it chooses you." Elise Vale, the psychic medium, sat apart, her pale hands clutching a silver pendant engraved with runes. Her dark hair framed a face too young for the shadows in her eyes, her silence louder than the rain. Her gaze fixed on the letter like it was a living thing, her breath shallow. "It's already watching us," she whispered, her voice a thread over the storm. Mara's patience thinned. "Enough, Elise. We're not chasing spirits. We're making a documentary, facts, evidence, history." Elise's fingers tightened on the pendant, her knuckles white. "You'll see. It knows we're coming." Gregor snorted, tossing the pencil onto the desk. "Great. A haunted prison and a psychic with stage fright. What's next, a cursed camera?" Jonas grinned, his teeth sharp in the dim light. "Laugh now, Halbrecht. You won't be laughing when the walls start talking." Mara folded the letter, her decision made, though doubt gnawed at her. "We leave in 3 days. Pack for a week. This is our chance to make something real." As the team dispersed, Elise lingered, her voice a faint tremor. "Mara, be careful what you call real. Some truths don't want to be found. The rain intensified, and in the silence that followed, Mara thought she heard a whisper, not from Elise, but from the letter itself. Chapter 2, The Journey. The valley was a predator, its fog a living shroud that swallowed their van whole. The road twisted through gnarled pines, their branches clawing at the mist like skeletal hands, their roots breaking the earth like bones. The air was thick with the scent of wet moss, damp earth, and something sharper, decay, or perhaps something older, something that lingered beyond the grave. Mara sat in the passenger seat, her notes open on her lap, but the words blurred as the fog pressed against the windows, a white veil that erased the world. Gregor drove, his knuckles white on the wheel, his usual banter silenced by the oppressive quiet. Jonas fiddled with his equipment in the back, motion sensors, EMF readers, a recorder for EVPs, humming a tuneless song that grated on Mara's nerves. Elise stared out the window, her reflection pale as a ghost, her pendant glowing faintly in the gloom. The village at the valley's edge was a cluster of stone cottages, their slate roofs slick with rain, their windows shuttered like closed eyes. The inn, a squat building with a creaking sign reading the Blackthorn, smelled of stale ale and wood smoke. The locals inside fell silent as the team entered, their eyes wary, their hands tightening around mugs. Mara approached the bar, her smile professional but strained, her notebook tucked under her arm. "We're heading to Brackenridge Keep," she said. "Any advice for the road?" The barkeep, a man with a face like weathered oak, froze, his rag pausing mid-wipe. "Don't go," he said, his voice low, rough as gravel. "That place ain't right. Never was." Jonas leaned in, his grin wolfish, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "Not right how? Ghosts? Demons? Spill the good stuff." The barkeep's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a hiss. "No ghosts. Worse. It listens. It takes. You go up there, you don't come back." An old woman by the fire, her hands gnarled as the pines, grabbed Mara's arm as they left, her grip iron despite her frailty. Her eyes were milky, blind but piercing. "Don't speak its name," she hissed, her breath sour with fear. "It hears. It remembers." Mara pulled free, her skepticism a reflex. "It's just a building." The woman's lips curled, a smile without warmth. "No, girl. It's a mouth." Back in the van, Elisa's hands trembled as she clutched her pendant, its runes pulsing faintly. "She's right," she said, her voice barely audible over the engine's hum. "Something's waiting. I feel it pulling, like a hook in my chest." Jonas checked his EMF reader, its needle twitching erratically. "Good. Let's meet it." Gregor muttered, "You're all insane," but his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, as if expecting something to follow. The fog thickened, the headlights useless, their beams swallowed by the white void. The road climbed, the van groaning under the strain, and Brackenridge Keep emerged like a specter, its towers jagged against a sky the color of ash. The cliff dropped sheer below, a void of mist and shadow. The prison's walls were blackened stone, pocked with lichen and scars from forgotten storms, its iron gates rusted and chained, groaning as if alive, their screech a warning that echoed into the valley. Chapter 3, The Iron Gates. The gates parted without a touch, their hinges screaming like a wounded beast, the sound reverberating through the fog. Mara's skin prickled as they crossed the threshold into the courtyard, where weeds choked cracked flagstones and a dry fountain stood like a tomb, its basin stained with something dark, blood, or rust, or worse. The air was heavy, pressing against their lungs, carrying a metallic tang that coated their tongues. Jonas set up motion sensors, their red lights pulsing like heartbeats in the gloom, their beeps erratic as if sensing something unseen. Gregor's camera whirred, capturing the decayed towers and barred windows, their glass long shattered, the frames gaping like empty sockets. A wind rose, sudden and sharp, carrying a low moan, not the wind, Mara realized, but something deeper, as if the cliff itself exhaled. Elise froze at the threshold, her breath shallow, her pendant glowing faintly, its runes casting a pale light on her pale face. "They know we're here," she said, her voice trembling, her eyes darting to the shadowed archways. "Hundreds of them. Watching. Waiting." Mara's skepticism wavered, but she clung to logic, her voice sharp. "Who, Elise? There's no one here but us." Elisa's gaze fixed on the darkness, her voice a whisper. "The ones who never left. The ones he keeps." Jonas knelt by a sensor, its light flickering wildly, its beeps a frantic rhythm. "Something's tripping these already," he said, his voice tight, his fingers trembling as he adjusted the device. "We're not alone." Gregor laughed, but it was forced, his camera shaking in his hands. "Bats, probably. Or rats. This place is a ruin, not a horror movie." Mara shone her flashlight into a doorway, its beam slicing through the gloom like a blade. The light caught something, a fleeting shape, too tall, too still, standing just beyond the threshold. It was gone when she blinked, but her heart pounded, her breath catching in her throat. "Let's move," she said, her voice sharper than intended. "We start with the main hall." They stepped inside, the air growing colder, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. The main hall was vast, its vaulted ceiling lost in darkness, its stone floor slick with moisture that seeped from nowhere. Chains hung from the walls, rusted but intact, swaying slightly though no breeze stirred. A single word was carved above the entrance, its letters deep and jagged, Silentium. Silence. The word seemed to hum, a vibration Mara felt in her bones, and for a moment, she thought she heard her name whispered in the dark. Chapter 4, The Halls Remember. The cell blocks were a labyrinth of rusted bars and crumbling stone, their corridors twisting like the veins of some ancient, diseased beast. The air was thick with dust, catching in their throats, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the drip of water echoing from unseen depths. Names were scratched into the walls, thousands, some etched so deeply they seemed carved with desperation, others faint as whispers, as if the hands that made them had faltered. Among them were phrases that chilled Mara's blood, "His silence is command, the mouthless speak, no voice, no sin." Some carvings looked fresh, the stone edges sharp, as if made hours ago, their letters glistening with moisture, or blood. Gregor's camera caught a shadow flitting past a cell, a figure in a tattered gray uniform, its face a blur of shadow, its movements too smooth, too silent. When they reviewed the footage, the screen was blank, the timestamp frozen at midnight, though it was barely dusk. "Faulty wiring," Mara said, her voice trembling despite her resolve, her hands shaking as she held the camera. She didn't believe it, not anymore, but admitting otherwise felt like surrender. Jonas traced a carving with his finger, his face pale, his eyes wide with something like awe. "This isn't vandalism," he said, his voice low, reverent. "It's a warning. They're still here, trapped in the walls, in the stone. They're trying to tell us something." Elisa's pendant slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor, its sound unnaturally loud in the silence. She didn't move to pick it up, her eyes distant, her voice a whisper. "They never left," she said. "He won't let them. He's their keeper." Mara's flashlight flickered, its beam catching a glint of metal, a key, half buried in the dust, its teeth warped as if melted, its surface cold as ice. She reached for it, but Elise grabbed her wrist, her nails digging in, her voice a hiss. "Don't touch it. It's his." "Whose?" Mara asked, though she dreaded the answer, her heart pounding in her chest. Elisa's voice was a breath, her eyes fixed on the key. "The Warden." The key seemed to hum, a low vibration that crawled up Mara's arm, and for a moment, she thought she saw the carvings shift, the words rearranging into her name. Chapter 5, Echoes of the Warden. The Warden's office was a cavern of decay, its oak desk splintered, its papers scattered like dead leaves across a floor stained with dark, irregular patches. A portrait hung crooked on the wall, its canvas warped, its subject obscured by mold, though Mara could make out the edge of a black uniform, hands clasped behind a back, and the hint of a face, a void where eyes should have been. The air was colder here, the silence heavier, as if the room held its breath, waiting for them to speak. They found a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle, the ink faded but legible under Jonas's flashlight. Warden Legrasse's words were meticulous, chilling, the voice betrays the soul. "Silence is control. To speak is to invite chaos." He described his discipline, sewing inmates' lips shut with black thread, their muffled screams a hymn to his power, their silence a testament to his dominion. The final entry was scrawled in haste, the letters jagged, smeared with what looked like blood, "They are mine. The silence binds them to me. I am their keeper." Mara slammed the book shut, her stomach churning, her hands cold as she set it on the desk. "This man was a monster," she said, her voice shaking, her skepticism crumbling under the weight of Legrasse's words. Elise stood by the portrait, her pendant glowing faintly, her eyes fixed on the void where the face should have been. "He's still here," she whispered, her breath fogging the air. "His will is in the walls, in the air. He's watching us." Gregor snorted, but his hands trembled as he adjusted the camera, its lens reflecting the portrait's empty gaze. "Let's not get carried away. He's dead, and this place is just stone and rot." Jonas opened the journal again, his fingers lingering on the pages, his voice low, almost reverent. He wasn't just cruel. He was building something. A prison for souls. This journal, it's not a record. It's a spell, a ritual to bind them forever. Mara's skepticism cracked, her mind racing, her heart pounding. A spell? Jonas, listen to yourself. This is madness. He met her gaze, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity. "Then why does it feel like he's standing behind me?" The portrait's frame creaked, tilting further, as if pushed by an unseen hand. The papers on the floor stirred, though no breeze moved through the room, and for a moment, Mara thought she heard a whisper, not from her team, but from the walls themselves, Silentium. Chapter 6, The First Night. They camped in the prison's chapel, its stained glass windows shattered, casting jagged shadows by the flickering light of their candles. The altar was cracked, its cross inverted, the stone stained with something dark, blood, or ink, or worse, that seemed to pulse under the candlelight. The air was heavy, the silence oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of Jonas's motion sensors, their beeps erratic, as if sensing something circling in the dark. Mara tried to sleep, her sleeping bag spread on the cold stone, but the darkness pressed against her eyes, alive with whispers she couldn't quite hear, syllables that twisted like thorns. At midnight, Jonas rose, his eyes glassy, his movements stiff, like a puppet on invisible strings. He walked to the solitary wing, his lips moving, whispering in a guttural tongue, syllables ancient and wrong, a language that seemed to crawl into Mara's mind, leaving a cold weight behind. Gregor tackled him, pinning him to the floor, his voice sharp with panic. "Jonas, wake up. What the hell are you doing?" Jonas blinked, his voice a rasp, his breath visible in the freezing air. "He told me to listen," he said, his eyes wide, unseeing. "He's in the silence. He's in my head." Elise screamed, collapsing to her knees, her hands clawing at her throat, her pendant glowing bright enough to cast shadows. "The mouthless man," she gasped, her voice breaking, her body trembling. "He's in the walls. He sees us. He wants our voices." Mara gripped her shoulders, her own heart racing, her voice urgent. "Elise, focus. What did you see?" Elisa's eyes were wild, her voice a sob, her words tumbling over each other. "He has no face, but he sees. He's everywhere, the shadows, the stones, the air. He wants us to be silent, like them. Like the ones he keeps." The candles flickered, their flames bending as if caught in a draft, their light dimming. Shadows danced on the walls, too tall, too thin, too human, their edges sharp as blades. Gregor's camera beeped, its battery dead despite a full charge, its lens reflecting something that wasn't there, a figure in black, standing just behind him. The motion sensors screamed, their lights flashing red, and the air grew colder, the silence heavier, as if the chapel itself were holding its breath. Mara's flashlight flickered, its beam catching a glint on the altar, a key, identical to the one in the cell block, its teeth warped, its surface glistening with moisture. She reached for it, but Elisa's hand shot out, stopping her, her voice a hiss. "Don't. It's a trap." The key seemed to hum, a low vibration that crawled up Mara's arm, and the whispers grew louder, forming a single word, silentium. Chapter 7, The Whisper Cell. A hidden door in the solitary wing, concealed behind a rusted grate, led to the Whisper Cell, a chamber of blackened stone that seemed to swallow the light. The walls were covered in wax-sealed mouths, human lips preserved in grotesque relief, some cracked, others glistening as if still alive, their edges pulsing faintly, as if breathing. The air was thick with the stench of wax, blood, and something sweeter, like rot laced with honey. The silence was absolute, a weight on their chests, broken only by the faint drip of blood from a cracked seal, pooling on the floor in the shape of a key. The other seals pulsed, their whispers forming a chorus, silentium. Silentium. Gregor gagged, backing away, his camera slipping from his hands, its lens cracking as it hit the stone. "This is insane," he said, his voice shaking, his eyes wide with panic. "This isn't history, this is hell. We need to leave now." Jonas touched the bleeding seal, his fingers trembling, his eyes wide with a feverish awe. "It's a message," he said, his voice low, almost reverent. "He's speaking to us. He wants us to understand his work." Elisa's pendant glowed brighter, its runes casting jagged shadows on the walls, her voice a whisper. "It's a trap," she said, her hands trembling, her eyes fixed on the mouths. "He wants us to stay, to join them. To be silent forever." Mara's flashlight flickered, its beam catching a shadow that moved too smoothly, too silently, a figure in a black uniform, standing at the far end of the chamber, its face a void, its hands clasped behind its back. It was gone when she turned, but the air grew colder, the whispers louder, forming her name, Mara. 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 She backed toward the door, her voice shaking, her heart pounding. We're not staying here. Move, now. But as they turned, the grate slammed shut, its hinges screeching like a scream. The key from the cell block floor was gone, and the mouths on the walls began to move, their whispers growing louder, their words clear. Stay. 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 Mara's breath caught, her mind racing. She grabbed a candle, its flame trembling, and held it to the nearest seal. The wax melted, revealing a mouth that opened, screaming, a sound that wasn't human, a wail that echoed in her bones. The other seals cracked, blood oozing, and the chamber shook, the stone floor trembling as if alive. Chapter 8, The Mediums Passed. They retreated to the chapel, their candles burning low, the shadows closing in like a tide. Elise sat by the cracked altar, her face pale, her hands trembling as she confessed, her voice barely audible over the hum of the motion sensors. My great-grandfather was an inmate here, she said, her words halting, her eyes distant. Executed without trial. His name was scratched into the walls, I saw it in the cell block, carved deeper than the others. I've dreamed of this place since I was a child, screams behind locked doors, a man in black who never speaks, his hands cold as stone. He's been waiting for me. Mara's skepticism was a fraying thread, her mind grappling with the impossible, her heart pounding. Why didn't you tell us, Elise? She asked, her voice sharp, though guilt softened its edges. We could have prepared, brought someone else. Elisa's tears fell, catching the candlelight, her voice breaking. I thought I could face him. I thought I could break the cycle, prove it was just dreams. But he's in my blood. This place knows me, it's been calling me my whole life. Gregor paced, his camera forgotten, his voice sharp with frustration. This is too much. We're not equipped for this. We're historians, not exorcists. We need to get out before we're all carving our names in the walls. Jonas's voice was low, intense, his eyes fixed on the journal, its pages open to Legrasse's final entry. We were chosen, Gregor, he said, his hands shaking, his face gaunt. This isn't random. The Foundation, the letter, us, it's all part of his plan. Legrasse wanted us here. Mara's heart pounded, her voice rising. Whose plan, Jonas? Legrasse is dead. This is a prison, not a conspiracy. Jonas met her gaze, his face pale, his eyes burning. Is he dead? Then why do I hear him whispering my name? Why do I feel him in my head, telling me to be silent? The candles snuffed out, plunging them into darkness, the air growing colder, the silence heavier. Elisa's pendant glowed, its light faint but steady, illuminating a single word scratched into the altar, fresh and deep, silentium. The walls hummed, the whispers returning, forming a chorus, stay. 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 Mara grabbed Elisa's hand, her voice urgent. We're not staying. We find a way out, now. But as they moved, the shadows shifted, and for a moment, Mara saw him, Legrasse, standing at the chapel's entrance, his void face watching, his presence a weight that crushed the air from her lungs. Chapter 9, Hollow Eyes. Gregor vanished during a routine camera check, his absence unnoticed until Mara called his name and heard only silence echoing through the cell block. They found him in a cell, slumped against the wall, his mouth crusted with dust and blood, his eyes wide and unblinking, staring at something none of them could see. He was mute, his jaw locked, his hands clutching a rusted nail, its tip red with his blood. Scratched into his palm was a single word: silence. Elise clutched Mara's arm, her nails digging in, her voice a sob, her pendant glowing faintly. "They've taken his voice," she said, her eyes wide with terror. "The Warden's claiming him. He's marking us, one by one." Mara shook Gregor, her voice rising, desperate, her heart pounding. "Gregor, talk to me. What happened? What did you see?" He only stared, his eyes hollow, reflecting nothing, as if his soul had been drained. His camera lay beside him, its lens cracked, the footage corrupted. Jonas played it anyway, the screen flickering with static, but for a moment, a face appeared, not Gregor's, but a void, a shadow with no features, standing behind him in the cell, its hands reaching for his throat. Mara's breath caught, her mind reeling, her skepticism shattered. "This isn't possible," she said, her voice trembling, her hands shaking as she backed away. Elisa's voice was a whisper, her eyes fixed on Gregor. "It's him. The Warden. He's here, in this cell, in the walls, in us." The cell door slammed shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot, the air growing colder, the shadows deeper. Gregor's hand moved, the nail carving into his arm, blood welling in the wounds, silentium. The walls pulsed, the carvings glowing faintly, and the whispers grew louder, forming a chant: "Stay. Stay. Stay." Mara grabbed Gregor's arm, pulling him to his feet, her voice sharp. "We're getting out. Now." But as they turned, the corridor twisted, the walls shifting, the carvings rearranging into a single phrase: "No voice, no escape." Chapter 10, Ritual of Silence. Jonas found a ritual script in the journal, written in Legrasse's jagged hand, a chant to bind souls in eternal silence, its words in a language none recognized, yet they burned into Mara's mind as she read them, each syllable a weight on her tongue, a coldness in her chest. The script was illustrated with symbols, coiled serpents, sealed mouths, keys without locks, each one pulsing faintly, as if alive. Legrasse wasn't just a sadist, Jonas said, his voice feverish, his hands shaking as he held the journal, its pages trembling in his grip. He was a cultist, channeling fear into something darker. This prison is his altar, and we're the offering. Mara scoffed, though her heart pounded, her throat tight, her skepticism a fragile shield. "You're buying into his madness, Jonas," she said, her voice shaking, her eyes fixed on the symbols. "This is a book, not a spell. We're not in a fairy tale." Jonas's eyes burned, his face gaunt in the candlelight, his voice low, almost a growl. "Then why does it feel like he's watching? Why do I hear him in my head, telling me to be silent? Why do I want to obey?" Elisa's pendant glowed brighter, its runes pulsing like a heartbeat, her voice trembling. "Because he's already inside you," she said, her hands clutching the pendant, her eyes wide with fear. "He's in all of us, waiting for us to speak, to give him our voices." Gregor, still mute, scratched at his arm, blood welling in the wounds, the word silentium carved deeper, as if his body were no longer his own. His eyes followed Jonas, a flicker of fear breaking through the void in his gaze. Mara backed away, her flashlight flickering, the shadows closing in like a tide. "We need to get out," she said, her voice urgent, her heart pounding. "This place is poisoning us." But the journal fell open, its pages turning on their own, the chant rising like a voice from the walls: "Silentium. Silentium. Silentium." The candles flickered, their flames bending, and the air grew colder, the silence heavier, as if the prison were listening, waiting for their next move. Jonas's voice was a whisper, his eyes fixed on the script. "We can't run," he said, his hands trembling. "We have to face him. We have to finish what he started." Mara grabbed the journal, slamming it shut, her voice sharp. "No, Jonas. We're not playing his game." But as she spoke, the shadows shifted, and Legrasse's form appeared at the end of the corridor, black uniform, void face, hands clasped behind his back, gliding toward them, his presence a weight that crushed the air from her lungs. Chapter 11. The Warden Walks. The corridor stretched endlessly before them, its walls pulsing with a faint, sickly glow, the carvings shifting like living things. Legrasse's form glided closer, his black uniform absorbing the light, his void face a hole in reality, his hands clasped behind his back as if in mockery of restraint. Mara's scream died in her throat, swallowed by the silence, her flashlight flickering, its beam useless against the darkness that followed him. The motion sensors screamed, their red lights flashing like panicked eyes, their beeps a cacophony that echoed in her skull. Jonas backed away, his camera trembling in his hands, the footage looping Legrasse's approach, each frame closer, sharper, the void of his face deeper, as if it could swallow them whole. "He's real," Jonas whispered, his voice breaking, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. "He's here, Mara. He's been waiting for us." Elise clutched her pendant, its glow dimming, its runes fading, her voice a sob. "He's not just here," she said, her hands trembling, her eyes fixed on Legrasse. "He's in us. In our thoughts, our voices. He's hungry for them, for our silence." Gregor, mute and hollow-eyed, scratched, he sees, into his forearm, the rusted nail drawing blood that dripped onto the stone, pooling in the shape of a key. His movements were mechanical, his gaze fixed on Legrasse, as if drawn to him, a moth to a flame. Mara grabbed his arm, her voice sharp, desperate. "Gregor, stop. Look at me." His eyes met hers, but they weren't his, a shadow moved within them, a void that wasn't human. She recoiled, her heart pounding, her breath shallow. The air grew colder, the silence thicker, broken only by a low hum, like a chant from 1,000 sealed mouths, the walls trembling with its force. Jonas slammed the camera down, its lens shattering, his voice rising, frantic. "We need to confront him. Legrasse wants us to see him, to know he's in control. We can't keep running, Mara." Mara's voice was a scream, her skepticism shattered, her mind reeling. "Confront what? A ghost? A demon? We're losing it, Jonas. This place is driving us mad." Elisa's voice was a whisper, her pendant dark, her face pale as death. "He's not a ghost. He's a will, a force. He's the silence that binds this place. And he wants us to join it, to become part of his prison." The hum grew louder, the shadows coiling like smoke, wrapping around Legrasse's form, his void face pulsing, as if drawing the light from their candles, their flashlights, their hope. A door at the end of the corridor creaked open, revealing only darkness, but in that darkness, Mara saw movement, figures, chained and mutilated, their mouths sealed, their eyes pleading. They weren't Legrasse, but his prisoners, his silenced souls, reaching for her. She grabbed Elisa's hand, pulling her back, her voice urgent. "We're not staying here. Run." But as they turned, Legrasse glided closer, his void face inches from hers, and the whispers became a scream, silentium. Chapter 12, screams behind the walls. The screams began at midnight, muffled but relentless, clawing their way through the walls like trapped animals. They weren't human, not entirely, but a chorus of anguish, a cacophony of voices silenced by Legrasse's thread, preserved in the stone like fossils. Mara woke in a cell, the door locked, her flashlight dead in her hand, its metal cold as ice. She had no memory of entering, no recollection of leaving the chapel where they'd camped, her mind a fog of whispers and shadows. The air was thick with the stench of rust, blood, and something sweeter, like decay laced with wax. The walls pulsed, the carvings glowing faintly, their words shifting, rearranging, "Scream and you'll be heard." She pounded on the door, her fists bruising, her voice hoarse, her heart pounding. Jonas. Elise. Gregor. No answer came, only the whispers, soft and sharp, slipping through the keyhole like a blade, their syllables cold as frost. "Scream," they hissed, "and you'll be heard. Scream, and he'll take you." Mara clamped her mouth shut, her body shaking, her breath shallow. The screams in the walls grew louder, forming words, names, pleas, curses, each one a voice Legrasse had stolen, a soul he'd bound. She pressed her ear to the wall, desperate for a sound of her team, but heard only her own name, whispered over and over, a chant that crawled into her mind, "Mara. Mara. Mara." Outside, Jonas's voice broke through, faint and frantic, echoing through the corridor. "Mara. Where are you? Answer me." She screamed his name, but the sound died, swallowed by the silence, her throat tightening as if an invisible thread were pulling her lips shut. The whispers laughed, a hiss like wind through bones, their words clear, "He can't hear you. No one can." Her flashlight flickered on, its beam weak, catching a glint in the corner, a key, warped and cold, its teeth glistening with blood. She reached for it, her hand trembling, but the wall pulsed, the carvings shifting into her face, her eyes wide, her mouth sealed with wax. She recoiled, her breath catching, her heart pounding. The key hummed, a low vibration that crawled up her arm, and the door creaked, unlocking itself, the key vanishing into the dust. She stumbled into the corridor, the screams louder, the walls trembling, the air colder. Jonas was there, his face pale, his eyes wild, his EMF reader screaming in his hands. "Mara," he shouted, grabbing her arm, his grip bruising. "We thought you were gone. The prison, it's changing, moving." Elise stood behind him, her pendant dark, her face pale, her voice a whisper. "It's him," she said, her eyes fixed on the walls. "He's trapping us, one by one. He wants our voices." Gregor was slumped against a wall, his arms covered in carvings, silentium, he sees, no voice, his blood pooling on the stone, his eyes empty, his body trembling as if possessed. Mara knelt beside him, her voice breaking. "Gregor, hold on. We're getting out." But the walls screamed louder, the carvings glowing, and Legrasse's form appeared at the corridor's end, his void face watching, his silence a weight that crushed her hope. Chapter 13, Sacrifice. Jonas's obsession consumed him, his eyes burning with a feverish intensity as he clutched the journal, its pages open to the ritual script, a chant to bind souls in eternal silence, its words a poison that seeped into their minds. They stood in cell block D, its corridors narrower, its air thicker, the walls pulsing with a sickly glow. The candles they'd brought flickered, their flames bending, their light dimming, as if the prison were draining them. Jonas's voice was low, urgent, his hands trembling as he read the script, its syllables twisting like thorns, ancient and wrong. "We can trap him," he said, his voice shaking, his eyes fixed on the journal. "Legrasse wants us to finish his work. If we complete the ritual, we can bind him, end this." Mara grabbed his arm, her voice sharp, her heart pounding. "Jonas, stop. You're playing his game. This is what he wants, our fear, our voices." Elisa's pendant was dark, her face pale, her voice a sob. "He's right, Mara. We can't run. But the ritual, it's not for us. It's for him. He's using you, Jonas." Gregor, mute and trembling, scratched at his chest, blood welling in the wounds, the word silentium carved deep, his eyes fixed on Jonas, a flicker of fear breaking through the void. His hands moved, pointing to the journal, then to the walls, as if warning them. Jonas ignored them, his voice rising, chanting the script, the words echoing in the corridor, the air thickening, the shadows coiling. The walls pulsed, the carvings glowing, and a figure emerged, not Legrasse, but an inmate, his mouth sewn shut with black thread, his eyes pleading, his hands reaching for Jonas. "He tried to warn us," Jonas whispered, his voice breaking, his eyes wide with terror. "He's free." The inmate lunged, his hands cold as stone, his fingers wrapping around Jonas's throat. Jonas screamed, but the sound was cut short, black thread appearing from nowhere, sewing his lips shut, blood dripping from the wounds. Mara tackled the inmate, her hands burning as she touched him, his form unraveling into shadow, his scream echoing in her mind. Jonas collapsed, blood pooling from his sealed mouth, his eyes wide, his hands clawing at his lips. Elise screamed, her voice breaking, her pendant cracking, its runes bleeding red. "He's taken him," she sobbed, her hands trembling. "He's claiming us all." Mara dragged Jonas to his feet, her voice urgent, her heart pounding. "We're not losing him. We're getting out, now." But the walls pulsed, the screams louder, and Legrasse's form appeared behind them, his void face watching, his silence a blade that cut through their hope. Chapter 14, Elise is taken. The chapel was a crypt, its shattered stained glass windows casting jagged shadows that writhed like living things under the flickering candlelight. The air was thick with the stench of blood, wax, and something sweeter, rot laced with despair. The screams in the walls, a chorus of silenced souls, pulsed like a heartbeat, their wails forming words that clawed at Mara's sanity. "Stay. Stay. Stay." Elise stood at the cracked altar, her pale hands trembling as she arranged their last candles in a circle, their flames bending as if fleeing an unseen draft. Her pendant, once glowing with runes, hung dark and lifeless, its silver tarnished, its surface cracked like her resolve. Her dark hair clung to her sweat-slicked face, her eyes wide with desperation, her voice a trembling plea. "We have to try," Elise said, her words tumbling over each other, her hands shaking as she traced symbols in the dust, runes from her family's lore, meant to summon spirits. "A seance is our only chance. We can reach the prisoners, the ones Legrasse silenced. They know how to stop him." Mara's heart pounded, her skepticism long shattered, replaced by a raw, gnawing fear. She grabbed Elisa's arm, her voice sharp, her fingers digging into her friend's cold skin. "Elise, no. The last ritual nearly killed Jonas. We can't risk this. We need to find a way out, not dig deeper into his trap." Jonas slumped against a pew, his sealed mouth crusted with dried blood, his eyes hollow, his hands clutching the journal like a lifeline. The black thread that bound his lips glistened, as if alive, pulsing faintly with each shallow breath. He nodded weakly, his muffled groan a plea, his fingers trembling as he pointed to the journal's blood-stained pages, where Legrasse's ritual script lay open, its symbols coiling like serpents. Gregor, mute and trembling, stood in the shadows, his body a canvas of carvings, silentium. He sees, no voice, etched into his arms, chest, and thighs, his blood dripping onto the stone, pooling in shapes that shifted, forming keys that vanished into the dust. His rusted nails scratched at his neck, drawing fresh blood, his eyes fixed on Elise, a flicker of recognition breaking through the void in his gaze, as if he saw something in her that wasn't human. Elise ignored them, her voice rising, chanting words from her own rituals, her hands trembling as she called to the spirits, her breath fogging the air despite the chapel's stifling heat. "Spirits of Brackenridge, hear me," she intoned, her voice cracking, her pendant twitching on its chain. "Show us the way. Break the silence. Free us from his will." The air thickened, the candles snuffed out one by one, their wicks hissing as if drowned. The shadows coiled, wrapping around Elise, her body convulsing, her eyes rolling back to show only whites, her mouth opening in a silent scream. The pendant shattered, its runes bleeding red across the stone, the liquid pooling in the shape of a mouth. Her voice changed, becoming Legrasse, cold, commanding, a blade that sliced through their minds. "She wears my silence now." Elise collapsed, her body lifeless, her limbs splayed like a broken doll. Mara lunged, grabbing her hand, her voice cracking, her heart pounding. "Elise, fight it. Come back. You're stronger than him." Her tears fell, hot against her cold skin, as she shook Elise, her friend's body limp, her skin icy. Elise's lips moved, but no sound came, her eyes opening, black voids, reflecting nothing, not even the candlelight Mara relit with trembling hands. She stood, her movements jerky, unnatural, like a puppet on fraying strings. Her voice was Legrasse, a hiss that filled the chapel, echoing in the walls. "You cannot run. You cannot speak. You are mine. This vessel is mine." Jonas staggered to his feet, his sealed mouth muffling a scream, his hands clawing at Elise, his fingers brushing her arm. Her body moved too fast, her strength inhuman, throwing him against the altar, its stone cracking under his weight, blood dripping from his reopened wounds. He gasped, his muffled voice a plea, "No, no." Gregor's carvings glowed faintly, his blood pooling, his nails scratching, "She is his," into his chest, his eyes wide with terror, as if he saw Legrasse in Elise's void eyes. He pointed to the journal, his hand trembling, his blood dripping onto its pages, the symbols pulsing, as if alive. Mara backed away, her flashlight flickering, its beam catching Elise's void eyes, which fixed on her, reflecting her own face, pale, terrified, her mouth beginning to close, as if an invisible thread were pulling tight. "Elise, please!" Mara screamed, her voice breaking, her heart pounding. "You're stronger than him. Fight!" Elise's body moved closer, her void eyes unblinking, her voice Legrasse, her words a chant, "Your voice is mine. Your fear is mine. Your silence is eternal." The walls pulsed, the screams louder, forming a chorus, "Silentium. Silentium. Silentium." Mara grabbed the journal, her hands shaking, her mind racing. "We're not yours," she shouted, her voice trembling, her throat tightening. She tore a page, the symbols burning her fingers, but Elise's body lunged, her cold hands wrapping around Mara's throat, her void eyes inches from hers, her voice a hiss, "You will be." The chapel shook, the altar cracking further, and the shadows coiled, forming figures, chained, mutilated, their mouths sealed, their eyes pleading. They weren't Legrasse, but his prisoners, their screams echoing in Mara's mind, their hands reaching for her, their voices a warning, run. Chapter 15, The Night of Hollow Men. The chapel was a maelstrom of shadow and sound, the screams in the walls a deafening chorus that drowned Mara's thoughts, their wails forming her name, a chant that clawed at her sanity, Mara. 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 The air was thick with the stench of blood, wax, and decay, the cold biting her skin, the silence a weight that crushed her chest. Spectral prisoners emerged from the shadows, dozens, then hundreds, chained to the walls, their bodies mutilated, their mouths sealed with wax or black thread, their faces twisted in agony, their eyes pleading, glowing faintly in the darkness. Some wore tattered uniforms, others were bare, their skin carved with silentium, their wounds weeping blood that pooled in shapes, keys, mouths, serpents, that shifted and vanished. Gregor saw his own face among them, a spectral double screaming silently, its mouth sewn shut, its eyes hollow, its hands reaching for him. He stumbled back, his rusted nail falling, his carvings glowing, his blood dripping onto the stone, forming a key that hummed, its vibration crawling up Mara's spine. No, he mouthed, his mute voice a silent scream, his eyes wide with terror, his body trembling as if possessed. Jonas, barely alive, tore at his sealed mouth, blood dripping, his fingers slick, his voice a muffled whisper, no sound. No sound. His eyes were wild, his hands clawing at the thread, tearing his lips, blood pooling on the altar, its stone now covered in symbols that pulsed, as if alive. He collapsed, his body shaking, his gaze fixed on the prisoners, as if recognizing them, his muffled scream echoing in the chapel. Elisa's possessed body stood at the altar, her void eyes fixed on Mara, her voice Legrasse, chanting the ritual script, its words a weight in the air, a coldness in their minds, silentium. 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 The prisoners moved closer, their chains rattling, their sealed mouths pulsing, as if trying to speak, to warn, their screams a chorus in Mara's mind, their voices overlapping, forming words, he takes. He binds. He keeps. Mara backed away, her flashlight flickering, its beam catching the prisoners, their faces shifting, some were strangers, others familiar, their features melting into hers, Jonas's, Elisa's, Gregor's. We're losing them, she screamed, her voice breaking, her heart pounding, her throat tightening as if an invisible thread were pulling her lips shut. We have to get out. The walls pulsed, the carvings glowing brighter, their words rearranging into a warning, no voice, no escape. The air grew colder, the silence heavier, as if the prison were feeding on their fear, their voices, their hope. Jonas staggered to his feet, his hands covered in blood, his eyes wide with terror, his muffled voice a plea, Mara, run. Gregor's carvings glowed brighter, his blood pooling, forming a key that vanished into the stone, his body trembling, his eyes fixed on Elisa's void eyes, as if seeing Legrasse within her. He lunged, his mute scream a silent wail, tackling Elisa's body, his hands burning as he touched her, her void eyes unblinking, her voice Legrasse, her words a hiss, you're next, Mara. He wants your voice. Mara grabbed Jonas, pulling him toward the chapel's entrance, her voice urgent, her heart pounding. Gregor, come on. But Gregor's body convulsed, his carvings glowing, his blood pooling, forming a serpent that slithered into the shadows, his eyes empty, his mute scream echoing in her mind. The chapel shook, the altar cracking, its stone splitting to reveal a void, a darkness that pulsed, a mouth that whispered, silentium. The prisoners closed in, their sealed mouths screaming, their hands reaching, their voices a chorus. Join us. Join us. Join us. Elisa's body moved closer, her void eyes reflecting Mara's face, her voice Legrasse, her words a chant. Your silence is eternal. Mara's flashlight died, the shadows swallowing them, and Legrasse's form appeared, his void face watching, his silence a blade that cut through her soul, her scream silent, her throat cold as ice. Chapter 16, Escape Attempt. The prison was a living labyrinth, its corridors shifting, its walls pulsing with a sickly glow, the carvings rearranging into their names, their faces, their fears. Mara dragged Jonas through the darkness, his sealed mouth bleeding, his body heavy, his muffled groans a constant reminder of their failure. Gregor was gone, his mute scream echoing in her mind, his carvings a map she couldn't read. Elisa's possessed body followed, her void eyes unblinking, her movements jerky, her voice Legrasse, her words a chant that filled the air. You cannot leave. You are mine. The air was thick with the stench of blood, wax, and decay, the cold biting her skin, the silence a weight that crushed her chest. The screams in the walls were relentless, their wails forming a chorus. Stay. 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 Mara's flashlight flickered, its beam weak, catching glimpses of the corridors, narrower now, their ceilings lower, the walls closer, as if the prison were contracting, swallowing them whole. They found a door, its frame warped, its surface cold as ice, its carvings glowing faintly, forming a serpent that slithered across the wood. Mara kicked it open, her voice a scream, her heart pounding. We're getting out. But the door led to another corridor, identical to the last, the carvings rearranging into her name, her face, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth sealed with wax. It's changing, she whispered, her voice trembling, her throat tightening, her lips cold. The prison, it's alive, it's trapping us. Jonas collapsed, his hands clawing at his mouth, his muffled voice a plea, no sound, his blood pooled, forming a key that vanished into the stone, his eyes wide with terror, his body trembling as if possessed. Mara knelt beside him, her voice urgent, her hands shaking. Jonas, stay with me. We're not giving up. Elisa's body appeared at the corridor's end, her void eyes glowing, her voice Legrasse, her words a hiss. You cannot run. Your voices are mine. She moved closer, her hands cold as stone, her fingers reaching for Mara, her void eyes reflecting her face, her mouth beginning to close, an invisible thread pulling tight. Mara pulled Jonas to his feet, her flashlight flickering, the shadows closing in. They found a tunnel, its walls slick with blood, its air thick with the stench of decay, its ceiling low, forcing them to crawl. The carvings glowed, forming a map, Gregor's carvings, his blood a guide, leading them deeper, but the tunnel looped, leading back to the chapel, the altar now covered in keys, each one warped, each one humming, silentium. Mara's heart pounded, her voice breaking. This can't be happening. She grabbed a key, its metal burning her hand, its hum a vibration that crawled up her arm, her throat tightening, her lips cold. The walls pulsed, the screams louder, and Jonas vanished into the darkness, his muffled scream fading, his blood pooling, forming a serpent that slithered into the shadows. Elisa's body lunged, her void eyes inches from Mara's, her voice Legrasse, her words a chant. You are mine. Mara dodged, her flashlight dying, the shadows swallowing her, the screams deafening, the silence a blade that cut through her soul. Chapter 17, Return to the Whisper Cell. Mara stumbled into the Whisper Cell alone, her team lost, Jonas gone, Gregor vanished, Elise a puppet of Legrasse's will. The chamber was a nightmare, its blackened stone walls pulsing, the wax-sealed mouths screaming her name, their blood pooling in shapes, keys, serpents, her face, that shifted and vanished. The air was thick with the stench of wax, blood, and decay, the silence a weight that crushed her chest, the cold biting her skin, her breath fogging despite the heat. She carried a flask of her own blood, drawn from her arm with a shard of glass, an offering from Legrasse's journal, its pages burned into her mind, its symbols a poison that seeped into her thoughts. The walls pulsed, the mouths screaming, their voices a chorus, Mara. 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 She knelt by the altar, its stone covered in keys, each one warped, each one humming, silentium. She read the journal's final entry, written in charcoal and madness, its words a blade in her mind, silence is eternal. I am its keeper. The voices are mine. The symbols pulsed, forming her face, her eyes wide, her mouth sealed, her scream silent. Her voice trembled, her throat tightening, her lips cold as ice. I'm not yours, she whispered, her words weak, her heart pounding, her hands shaking as she poured the blood onto the altar, its liquid pooling, forming a mouth that opened, screaming, a wail that echoed in her bones, a chorus of the dead, their voices free, their screams deafening. The walls shook, the mouths cracking, blood oozing, the stone splitting, the air colder, the silence heavier. Legrasse's form appeared, his void face a hole in reality, his black uniform absorbing the light, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice a blade in her mind. You cannot break me. Your voice is mine. Mara's lips began to close, an invisible thread pulling tight, her scream silent, her throat cold, her vision blurring. The mouths screamed louder, their blood pooling, forming her name, her face, her eyes wide with terror. She grabbed a key, its metal burning her hand, its hum a vibration that crawled up her arm, her heart pounding, her mind fraying. I'll burn this place first, she gasped, her voice breaking, her hands trembling as she struck a match, its flame trembling, its light weak. The walls pulsed, the screams deafening, and Legrasse's void face grew, his silence a weight that crushed her soul, her scream silent, her body trembling. Chapter 18, The Hollow Warden. Legrasse's form towered, a specter woven from shadow and silence, his void face a hole in reality, his black uniform a shroud that swallowed the light, his hands clasped behind his back, their fingers long and sharp, like blades. His voice was a blade in Mara's mind, cold and eternal, become my keeper, or lose your voice forever. The whisper cell pulsed, the wax-sealed mouths screaming, their blood pooling, forming her face, her eyes wide, her mouth sealed with wax, her scream silent, her throat cold as ice. Mara's lips closed, an invisible thread pulling tight, her scream silent, her vision blurring, her heart pounding. The altar was covered in keys, each one warped, each one humming, silentium. Gregor's carvings appeared on the walls, his blood a map, guiding her to a hidden niche, its stone carved with a serpent, its mouth open, its fangs dripping blood. Inside was a relic, a bone, human, carved with runes, pulsing faintly, as if alive. She grabbed it, its surface burning her hand, its hum a vibration that crawled up her arm, her throat tightening, her lips cold. I'm not yours, she screamed, her voice breaking, her words muffled, her heart pounding. The relic pulsed, its runes glowing, forming words, break the silence. Legrasse's void face grew, his silence a weight that crushed her soul, his voice a hiss, you cannot. Your fear is mine. Your voice is mine. The mouths screamed louder, their blood pooling, forming a serpent that slithered toward her, its eyes void, its mouth open, its fangs dripping blood. Mara's vision blurred, her body trembling, her scream silent. She struck the match again, its flame brighter, its light cutting through the shadows. She touched it to the relic, its bone igniting, the flames roaring, consuming the altar, the keys, the journal, the mouths. The screams became a chorus, the dead's voices free, their wails deafening, their rage a force that shook the chamber, the stone cracking, the air thick with ash and blood. Legrasse's form unraveled, his void face twisting, his voice a howl, "You cannot silence me." The serpent lunged, its fangs inches from her throat, but the flames consumed it, its scream echoing in her mind, its void eyes fading, its body dissolving into shadow. Mara ran, the flames chasing her, the walls collapsing, the mouth screaming, the keys vanishing, the air colder, the silence heavier, her scream silent, her heart pounding, her soul fraying. Chapter 19, The Final Echo. The prison was a collapsing beast, its corridors crumbling, its walls pulsing, the flames roaring, consuming the whisper cell, the chapel, the cell blocks, the towers. Mara ran, her lungs burning, her vision blurring, her scream silent, her throat cold as ice. The screams of the dead were a chorus, their voices free, their wails deafening, their rage a force that shook the cliff, its stone cracking, its edge crumbling, the valley below a void of fog and shadow. The walls pulsed, the carvings glowing, forming her name, her face, her eyes wide with terror, her mouth sealed. Legrasse's void face appeared in the flames, his voice a howl, "You cannot silence me." His form unraveled, his black uniform dissolving, his hands reaching, their fingers sharp as blades, their tips brushing her skin, cold as death, her scream silent, her heart pounding. She found the courtyard, its fountain now a mouth, its basin filled with blood, its surface pulsing, forming keys that hummed, silentium. The gates were open, their hinges screaming, the fog a living shroud that swallowed her, the cliff trembling, the prison collapsing, the flames roaring, the screams deafening. Mara stumbled into the fog, her body bruised, her mind frayed, her scream silent, her throat cold. The valley was silent, the prison a smoldering ruin, its towers gone, its walls ash, its cliff scarred. The flames died, the screams faded, and Legrasse's void face appeared one last time, his silence a blade that cut through her soul, his voice a whisper, "You are mine." She fell to her knees, her hands trembling, her heart pounding, her scream silent. The fog thickened, the valley swallowed her, and the silence was eternal, a weight that crushed her soul, her voice gone, her mind fraying, her body trembling. Chapter 20, A Quiet Return. Mara woke in the village, her body bruised, her mind a fog of whispers and shadows, her voice a trembling rasp, her throat cold as ice. The inn was silent, its locals gone, their eyes replaced by voids, their mouths sealed, their hands reaching for her in her dreams. Brackenridge was a smoldering ruin, its cliff scarred, its valley a void of fog and shadow. Elise, Jonas, and Gregor were lost, their fates sealed in the prison's collapse, their names carved in her mind, their screams echoing in her soul. She returned to London, her documentary abandoned, her notes burned, her camera destroyed. In her final monologue, recorded in a voice that wasn't hers, she whispered, "Brackenridge isn't a place. It's a silence that waits to be heard again." The words were Legrasse, his void face in her mind, his silence a blade that cut through her soul. She never spoke of it again, but at night, in the quiet, she heard the whispers, soft, relentless, forming a chant, silentium. Her mirror showed her face, but her reflection's eyes were wrong, voids, unblinking, watching. Her lips moved, a silent scream, and the key from the pendant appeared in her hand, its metal cold, its hum a reminder, you are mine. The world moved on, oblivious, but Mara was bound, her silence a chain, her voice a prisoner, her soul a cell, Legrasse's keeper forever, the whispers eternal, the darkness hers.